guys, I am Dr. Kim Sage. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today's video is all about no contact and what it really means, what it looks like, how to know if it's time to go no contact, what you can do to actually make it happen, how to deal with what comes afterwards, things like guilt and other people judging you and questioning you, and just some more thoughts about why and how no contact can be helpful for you and your story. So please consider, if you are new here to my channel, if you'd like to get signed up for receiving more videos, please consider subscribing and clicking the bell, and that way you'll be notified when I post new videos. Today's video is really about, well, what do you do when you have been in an abusive and toxic relationship with someone in your life that has just gone on forever, whether it's an ex, a marriage ex, a partner, a best friend, a sibling, and probably one of the hardest cases, a parent. When and why and how would you do that? Now, I will say this, before most people arrive at no contact, they have tried everything. They have tried, being sort of close, being disengaged, having a surface relationship, having boundaries, or having no boundaries. Usually a lot of things have happened. And so this is the first thing I want you to know, that I know that if you are actually considering going no contact, that no one goes no contact without first, most likely, engaging in a very abusive cycle of emotional, physical, mental abuse, really. And so that's important to remember when the rest of the world may not always support your decision. It also can be helpful, as we'll talk about, how to help you stay on track and the reasons why you went no contact should you decide to do so. So the first part of this is really that no contact. What does it mean? It means that you basically remove yourself and cut out connection and relationship from this person in your life. It means no text messages, no holidays, no birthdays, no occasional phone calls. You literally remove yourself as if that person no longer exists from your life. Now, before you get there, you might hopefully have tried many things, like reducing your relationship, ideally, setting boundaries, ideally, maybe having a very surface kind of gray rock relationship where it's just very, disengaged, and maybe it's once or twice a year. That's usually the process. We don't usually just wake up and go to no contact, unless we have been doing all of that in some version, and one day we just decide, you know what, and it's usually after something happens, something that's very hurtful, you just decide, I'm not doing this anymore. Now, of course, we live in the world of technology, and so it can be a bit challenging to do so. If somebody really wants to get a hold of you, they will, but trying to set things up like blocking text messages and phone calls and emails, it really can help, because if you just get one little hit of connection there after you've moved away from it, that's all it takes sometimes to suck us back into that very toxic cycle. What I've noticed is that people often, like I'm saying, they kind of get stuck in these patterns, and maybe they're psychologically moving away, but the person can just, let's say, out of nowhere, start blasting them in text messages or saying hurtful things about them to someone else, right? You just end up, going along in your day, and out of nowhere, they intrusively find ways to hurt you. And that is a really good reason why going no contact and blocking somebody, and I don't mean like intermittently blocking someone, which you can do as well, but when you do that, you're not really doing it with any intention. And so the person is sort of somewhat motivated to keep trying with you, because eventually you will unblock them, or they will unblock you. Maybe it's a punishment, and they know that you'll get back into the cycle. So many people recommend writing a letter, letting someone know, not getting into a back and forth, like a phone call or meeting in person. Maybe you write the letter, and an old-fashioned letter, and mail it, and you just say something simple like, I can no longer continue with you in this relationship. It has become too damaging for me, and I will no longer be engaging in a connection or relationship with you. You can send a text message and then block them right afterwards. Same thing with an email, but if you want to let them know, you can do that. And it's probably a good idea, because that way you're at least setting the expectation that, look, I am doing this, and I'm not going to change my mind. Now, you don't have to list the reasons why you're doing it, because if you do it in person or over the phone, they're going to come back at you with their victim mentality, or they're blaming you too, and maybe you weren't perfect, and that's going to suck you back in. And so, if it helps you to say, and these are all the reasons, go ahead and do that. But just don't do it in a way where you're expecting a sort of reciprocity about that, because chances are it's not going to go very well. That's the first thing. The second thing to know is that the rest of the world, for some reason, thinks that certain people in our lives are exempt from being abusive. And so it's just fine for them to abuse you if they are your parents, if they are your siblings, if they are, your ex-partner. Now, if you have children with somebody and you're sharing custody, obviously you can go gray rock and try to be disengaged. And that's ideal, let's say, with a narcissist. But you cannot expect to go fully no contact, because you need to maintain contact on behalf of your kids. And even once they're grown, if you make it so aggressive, that can be bad too. So you have to figure out, is there some balance that protects you and works for you? But in many other cases, there is really no real reason why you can no longer be in contact with them. It's not convenient. The family or others in the circle may not understand it or like it, but you can maintain that boundary. And so that does make a difference as you become older and you're able to do that in terms of, autonomy and things like that. And so it's important to know that, you are going to probably face some challenge there. And we'll talk about how to deal with that in just a minute. The other thing you're going to face is that you are going to feel at times guilty. I will argue, though, that when you are in the chaotic relationship day in and day out, and the abuse, and it's good and it's bad, and it's good love and bad love, and they're hurtful, they're hurtful and they're not hurtful, the weight of that is so heavy that the weight of what it feels like to no longer be engaged with them, as hard as it is to finally get there, there is a freedom that comes, and a control and a power you have back over your life, that even though you have whispers of sadness and maybe more in the beginning and these feelings of guilt and longing, and you have to, of course, grieve the relationship you wished you were going to have with them, the one you kept hoping for, or grieve the pain of the one that you had, this is so much lighter than this one. It truly is. Over time, like everything, we get stronger. Of course, things like holidays and birthdays, they bring it back, and you will have to live with the fact that, they may no longer be here anymore once you disengage from them. But the odds are that if you have decided to engage in no contact, you have already been through so much abuse psychologically with them that you've finally realized or thought to yourself or decided there is no other alternative. So that's important, to remind yourself. So I would suggest making a list of a pro-con list if you decide you're not sure if you want to go, no contact. What would be the pros and the cons, and look at it on, in front of you. The next thing I would suggest you do, and it's kind of an awful thing to do, it's an exercise, but is to write down, this is ideally before you go no contact, write down every horrible thing they have said and done to you over the course of the relationship, over your life, because when you start to feel weak, or they start to get, back in the circle somehow, or someone's making you feel bad about it, and you're thinking, yeah, God, should I have done that? You can go back and look at your list and remind yourself, because the brain doesn't want to think about at times all of that abuse, all of those wounds, that, no, I am justified in making this decision, and it can really be helpful in those moments. You don't want to look at it all of the time, but when you're feeling those pangs of guilt or wound, that's a good way to respond. Now, when others start to come into your circle and they say things like, they're judging you or questioning you about it, you can say things like, look, this topic is off limits. I respectfully will not be discussing it with you. I am choosing not to have this conversation with you. This is between my sibling and I. This is between my mom and me. Whatever it is, my dad and me, my ex-partner. You make it clear with boundaries that you will not negotiate or discuss or talk about this relationship you've decided to go no contact with someone else. Now, you're going to walk around sometimes feeling this fear of, are they going to contact me? Am I going to run into them? Am I going to see them somewhere? And depending upon where you live, that may be the case. If that happens, the best way is to quickly remove yourself and disengage, to not get into some public disagreement or argument about the situation. And then obviously they can't contact you later. They could come to your house, of course. You can also decide not to engage there. But usually over time, once you make it clear you are done engaging in that relationship, it usually ends up, eventually they respect it and it becomes just the way things are. Sometimes over time, we think, okay, it's been many years now and I'll let them back in again. And if you let them back in and it goes well, great. Consider yourself lucky. If it doesn't and you think, oh my God, I cannot believe I fell into this trap again, at least you know how to get yourself out. I would say with loving grace and compassion, just remind yourself that it happens, that you tried, and yet follow the steps again that worked before. The last part of this is to know that you always live with that I'm a bad child inside that pops up, or I'm a bad sibling, or I'm a bad partner, because so much of the abuse with people who are abusive is about making us feel bad about ourselves. And that's something you have to wrestle with, usually long after no contact. You're still dealing with those feelings. And so they're going to pop up in connection with this relationship, especially when jerky other people think they know better and they try to tell you, well, that's your mom. Well, that's your dad. Well, you were married to him for 20 years, or you guys had an apartment together and had 2 dogs together, whatever it is. No. Understand that it is okay for you to feel those pangs of sadness and guilt, but that those do not belong to you. That trusting yourself, that you are making the decisions that are good for you are what matters. And you're not bad inside for protecting yourself. In many cases, I really do see no contact as a final act of self-protection when we were unable to protect ourselves in those relationships. Now, the last other little part I will say is that there are often sometimes some collateral issues that happen. Let's say if you go no contact when your kids are little with a parent, right, or a sibling. But if that parent is toxic and abusive and traumatic to you in front of your kids or towards your kids, is it really better to have them in your kid's life? I would say no. Your job as a parent, number one, is to protect your children. And that includes from anyone and everyone who causes them harm. Now, what happens if you decide to go no contact and your kids are older? It's pretty hard to block your kids from contacting a grandparent or a sibling of yours, an aunt or uncle, if your kids are nearly grown. What you can do is just, be vocal with your kids, explain it and talk to them about boundaries and how to set them, what's appropriate, what's not. Sometimes those relationships stay kind of surfacey and they're fine. Other times the toxic person will try to scoot your child as a young adult or someone else into your role and begin grooming them and being abusive to them. And of course, you still can't stop that if your child is an adult, but you can talk to them about what's appropriate. You can answer questions with your children about, well, why aren't you talking to so-and-so again, and what happened, or reinforcing when things happened, how they were unhealthy and not okay. I know it's not easy. The 2 biggest issues you're going to face are your own voice feeling guilty in the beginning, which gets better, and occasionally those like gremlins that pop up, and they are gremlin people who try to tell you that you're not doing it right, or you're trying to control your child's exposure to someone toxic. It's ridiculous. Don't buy into it. Don't. I know it's triggering. I get it. But trust yourself. Know that more than anyone else, you know what happened between the 2 of you. And just because someone else chooses to stay in a toxic relationship, it's their decision. It's not yours. Trust yourself. Love yourself enough to do it. If you decide to do it, of course, like I said, try to do the other steps first, where you try to have boundaries, you try to work it out, go gray rock, go, limited contact. But when none of that works and they are still abusing you, it's time for something else. And I promise you that, as I did in this interview with Ophelia, who had to, release her mother at a certain point in her life, she said, I've been happier every day since I did it. That freedom that you feel is truly a peaceful weight off your shoulders. Sometimes it gets heavy and pops up, but it is nothing compared to the daily, weekly, and monthly abuse that you face in the hands, in the relationship with a toxic, wounding person, no matter who they are. So, thanks for watching. Please stay safe and well. If you'd like to subscribe, please click the bell. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.